Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness. A letter from the Prime Minister.
Can't it wait?
Concerning their Imperial Majesties, the Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. The government is willing to send a ship to bring the Romanovs to safety here in England. The Prime Minister does not wish to do so without your support, public perception, and so forth. The war. Shall I go back with a yes?
To their rescue? Show it to your mother. Her judgment is unfailingly better than mine. What say you, my lord? Do we send the ship?
No. It's possible one might come to regret it.
Ввиду того, что ваши родственники в Европе продолжают наступление на советскую Россию, Урал-исполком постановил вас расстрелять. То что?
Да здравствует революция!
Welcome to Buckingham Palace, Your Excellency. Would you like to follow me?
Ваше Величество,
Your Majesty,
хочу обратиться к вам с просьбой,
I have a request
визитом,
that you would come to Moscow on a state visit
чтобы коммунизма
to celebrate the
и
end of
возрождение
communism
демократии.
and the restoration of democracy.
I'm flattered by your invitation. But there is something you should have considered before extending it.
Чего она?
What is it?
Ipatiev House, where Tsar Nicholas and his family, beloved cousins of my grandfather, King George V, were murdered by the Bolsheviks. I understand you personally gave the order for that house to be demolished, an act of great disrespect to my family's memory.
Стало позорным
Yes.
актом
Its demolition was a shameful piece
коммунистического варварства.
of communist barbarism.
Но дело было в 70-м.
And you have my word
Полагающиеся почести.
that I will do everything I can to restore their dignity.
Good. Then we can discuss royal visits.
Within hours of arriving back in Moscow, President Yeltsin ordered the excavation of the forest near Ipatiev House. He personally insisted that the very best team of forensic scientists be sent. And sure enough, they soon found bones. It was clear a horrific murder had taken place in line with historical accounts. Skulls smashed in by rifle butts, bullets embedded in temples. After the slaughter, it seems the Bolsheviks doused the bodies in acid, burned their clothes, and buried them in a mass grave. The authorities are confident that these are indeed the Romanov remains. But because of the acid damage, the authentication process has hit something of a dead end. Russian pathologists have been painstakingly assembling the fragments, grouping them by sex and cross-referencing with dental records. But there's only so much they can do, which is why they have now come to us, and more particularly, His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
I'm told the best way to identify and authenticate the remains is through DNA. And it turns out the only place in the world for bone DNA sequencing is here, in England.
Aldermaston, yes.
And apparently, because of the age of the bones, they can only use a particular kind of DNA that passes through the maternal line.
Mitochondrial.
Oh, you knew that?
Yes.
How?
I read.
Anyway, since your maternal grandmother Princess Victoria of Hesse, was Empress Alexandra's elder sister, making the Tsar's wife.
My great aunt, yes.
It turns out you can be incredibly useful.
Well, that's a first. How?
By helping them to prove if the remains are or are not the Romanovs. By giving a sample of whatever it is that they need.
To get to my DNA, they took a sample of my blood, which they vacuum sealed in a plastic bag.
Then they have to extract it.
Yes, using these strange machines. Look, you see, I did a drawing there. Then to separate it all out, they use this centrifuge.
Oh, yes.
Eventually, all you're left with is this tiny amount of DNA, which they subject to an electrical current. What started out as a file of my blood has been transformed into this image, a unique pattern of parallel bands called lanes. The idea behind it is that we compare these bands with those of the Romanovs and, hey presto.
It was a match.
Yes, with 98.5% certainty, which means the case can be closed and the Romanovs buried with dignity.
All thanks to you.
No, thanks to science.
It's had the most extraordinary effect on him. Not just the science, but connecting with his own past. You know how he's always been restlessly searching and scratching away, trying to make sense of who he is or what he is.
Always been something of a mongrel.
Well, the uncovering of the Romanov remains seems to have reawakened a fascination in him with all things Russian.
Why? The person he's related to, the Tsarina, was born Alex of Hesse and was German, not Russian. As German as white sausage.
Don't tell Philip that. Because now that it has been confirmed that we are going to Russia, he's been reading book after book.
Really?
Yes, connecting with his Orthodox roots.
God to help us.
Oh, I'm all for it. It's just so good to have him engaged again. Very nice to see you.
Ваше Величество.
Ваше Королевское Высочество.
Ваше Высочество.
Mr. President, I stand here today as the first British monarch to ever set foot in Moscow. You are the first democratically elected leader in Russian history. Thanks in part to family ties, there has always been a strong bond between our countries. But in recent years, that close alliance has become estranged. Warm ties of kinship became frozen into a decades-long winter. There have been times where we have seemed to live in different worlds. In making this historic trip, I hope to usher in not merely a thaw, but a comprehensive new footing based on cooperation, understanding, and respect. A new era of partnership in which both of us can flourish together.
Золотые слова, Ваше Величество.
I'm terribly sorry about this being the last bit. Hold up with the few.
Oh, no.
It seems they're unable to identify two of the bodies.
Thank you. This is very disappointing. We come all this way on the understanding that my relatives will finally be buried to discover the burial can't take place.
Why not?
One or two of the bodies still remain unidentified. And Russian Orthodox authorities continue to demand certainty they haven't mistaken the Tsar's body for his cook, for example. This is before we get to infighting between the Russian government and various factions of the Romanov family. Not to mention the local authorities of Moscow, St. Petersburg and Yekaterinburg about when and where the burial should take place.
I'll give it time.
The Prime Minister, Your Majesty.
Prime Minister.
Your Majesty, I'm delighted to say Russian scientists have now confirmed the final set of remains as Tsar Nicholas, which means the official burial of the imperial family can take place.
Good.
In his phone call with me, a positively giddy President Yeltsin said he hoped a line could be drawn under the matter once and for all, and that friendship and cooperation between our two countries could resume. I believe Yeltsin is sincere in his desire for democracy. One just wishes he led with greater...
Sobriety?
Authority. Reports out of Russia suggest the landscape is dangerously unstable. And the worry is it will result in the need for hardline leadership again. And we will be back to square one.
Except, I prefer to think of square one with Russia as a state of friendship, not enmity. One forgets our two nations, thanks in part to family ties, have been more successful as allies than enemies. Seen like that, the Revolution and Cold War are a blip in an otherwise long and happy marriage.